On the Supreme Court ruling, I mean, is using race as a factor? I mean, the argument is essentially that students were not getting into having opportunities in higher education, and that we should be considering different, circumstances in allowing these people into school. Do you think that the Supreme Court should rule that affirmative action is okay to make up for the differences that Jason is highlighting?
I don't. I feel like affirmative action should be eliminated. And I see the reverse of this happening too in the Asian community. There was recently a story about an Asian student who, and I saw this personally with a good friend of mine, Dr. Ming Wang, who was discriminated against because he was Asian, wasn't allowed to come to the school because of that reason. So there, it's when we start to look at skin color or ethnicities, things like that, as determining factors for who should get in and who shouldn't. And this was someone who scored the highest in the country on the MCAT. So it should be based on effort, and it should be based on merit and on your willingness to work hard. It should not be based. I don't think skin color has any possible place in that discussion.
Jason, going off of that, one of the concerns for some of the students who are being accepted into universities with affirmative action is that a lot of the students are not used to the workload or expectations of sort of higher level colleges because their lower level education didn't sort of set them up for that. And some students don't do well in college. Some of them drop out. Is there a concern with setting students up for failure with affirmative action?
No, and I think not necessarily. I think we need to be careful about making generalities here, because even if a student gets accepted to a university because, let's say, based on some affirmative action criteria, there's something called, and I'm going to piggyback off a point that Diane brought up, there is something called merit. And I can't tell you the number of times where, I've seen people who might not have met a certain academic standard to get into a university, yet at the same time, to use a Republican mantra, they pulled themselves up by the bootstraps and they got to work and they learned. I think it also highlights another factor is if you do have someone who comes into a university and they're not necessarily equipped in terms of the workload, that's the power of allyship. That's the power of having professors and having a support system around them to pull them up. I think it's so interesting because we're sitting here talking about how people should get into universities based on their merit, and we should not consider skin tone, such as Diane brought up. I will tell you, as a freshman at Valparaiso University, I know of a student. He scored a 13 on his ACT. I think you score like 11 just because you write your name correctly on the ACT. But he got in because his father is a wealthy donor to the university. So if we're going to go ahead and we're going to say skin color should not be a reason why someone gets in, then we need to eliminate all type of preferential treatment across the board. We need to eliminate the legacy system that allows the children of wealthy alums to get accepted to universities. We need to potentially get rid of athletic scholarships, right? Because people should be able to qualify based on their academic standards, not necessarily the fact that they can jump or catch a football or throw a baseball. I think across the board, it's very easy to talk about race because that's the one thing that we all have in common is that we are different. It's easy to talk about race because we can see it, but I think that we need to have a better explanation as to what comes next.